Welcome back to the Encore Audio's YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. You know, I have found a spindle full of sandy beach. It says Sandy B on it, but it is Sandy Beach. He passed some time ago. You can look down in the description. It gives a description of how and when he passed. He was at a step study, in his daily morning step study meeting, and reading the first step, and what a way to go. Anyways, I found a bunch of workshops and individual talks, the Brentwood meeting. It's my full collection. I hope you enjoy this talk. Have a good day if you want to. I really hope you do.
Thank you, Tim. Hi, everybody. I'm Sandy Beach, and I'm an alcoholic. How you all doing? Boy, I can't thank you enough for inviting me back. I had the best time last time, and everywhere I go, I tell them how much fun the Brentwood group was. It was quite a night. I had just a delightful time, and I came in a few days ago, and June's been showing me around, and I'm seeing faces that I love, and so I feel so much at home here. And my friend Jim Heth is down here, who was, we talked about it the last time he was here. He was the other pilot in the plane when I had my last flight in the Marine Corps. And we suddenly got reunited outside the door here. And I found out what really happened. Not what I thought happened. And when you replace what really happened with what you thought happened, sometimes your past gets very comfortable, because most of our old ideas aren't right anyway. But we created them, and we lived with the results of them. And when you can go back and erase them, you get free. And that's a lot of what spirituality is getting free from those old ideas. I don't think I'll talk about my story. Yes, I will. There's new people here, so I'll tell you. I got sober on December 7th, 1964. And I'm one of these guys that just came here and never picked up another drink. I had a good sponsor. He was my sponsor for 42 years. And he passed away a couple years ago. He was another Marine named Bill Terwilliger. And we became fast friends. And before he died, we got together up in Virginia, and we went back to the group where he took me to my first meeting. And I got to give a talk there with him in the audience about 4 months before he passed away. And we sat down afterwards, and we both just said, "Boy, has this been fun." And there was no regrets. It was just what a joy to share the human experience with each other instead of by ourselves. And so we're having one tonight, and we're having it together. And that's the way it ought to be, because being alone is tough. And I did all my drinking except for the college years in the Marine Corps, and I was a fighter pilot, and I got married, and I had 6 kids, and it looked like everything was wonderful. But the disease was taking over, and eventually I was having withdrawal symptoms in the plane, and crazy things were happening, and there was no alcohol programs, and so I just decided to hang in there no matter what. And I suppose I really was flirting with danger, because these were hard planes to fly. I sometimes would fly with one hand on the ejection seat and then fly the mission. And my theory was that if I passed out, it wouldn't have worked, but I comforted myself by saying that if I pass out, I'll fire the seat as I fall forward, and the seat will fire, the chute opens automatically, the plane crashes, I'm safe, problem solved. So it was, and I suddenly said, good, you're still thinking, you're still ahead of the curve here. That's a strange way to look at a successful solution. And eventually, I lost my flight status and I became an air traffic controller, which is a perfect job for someone who's about to die. And then I drank around the clock and I lost about 50 pounds due to malnutrition. And I ended up having a grand mal seizure at Quantico, Virginia, and I bit my tongue, and then I was sent to the hospital. And in about 5 days, I had the delirium tremens and hallucinated that the CIA was trying to trick me into being insane, and I guess I did go insane. And they put me in a straitjacket and locked me up for 6 months. And so that was my successful skyrocketing career. And sometimes I do a slideshow routine. I'm not going to do it tonight, but I have no pictures, but it's an imaginary slide on the wall of all the scenes in my life, and the one near the end is the straitjacket. Now here's a shot of me in a straitjacket. As you can see, it's the wrong size. I take a 42 long, and that's a 38 regular. So, couldn't even move in it. I enjoy this, I'm sorry, you'll have to put up with it. And a group of AA members came into that hospital and convinced the psychiatrist that there were alcoholics there, and there were, and that's how I found out about AA. And later on, as an outpatient, they told me if I drank again, I'd lose my career. And I didn't think they meant drink again, I thought they meant get drunk again. So I started drinking as I was checking out of the nut ward. And I knew they were going to catch me, and so that's when I called the intergroup, and they sent my sponsor over. He took me to a meeting. I had about 3 hours sobriety when I got to the meeting. It was a group anniversary in Manassas, and it went on and on. They had square dancing, they went fiddle players, and it just went on and on. And I had about 8 hours sobriety when the meeting ended. I thought it was never going to end. And I always like to thank this Al-Anon lady, Betsy Lynch, because I was going to run away. This thing was going on, they're all laughing and in there, and I'm standing outside. It was winter, and it was a little like sleety or freezing rain, but there were no street lights. There was nowhere to run to. I was looking to run. And I felt this hand on my shoulder, and it was like an angel. And I turned around, and this woman was looking at me and said, "Come on back in, it's going to be all right." And I believed her. And I felt the fight go right out of me. I just walked back in, and it's been okay ever since. It's been okay ever since. And of course, I followed the great spiritual journey laid out in our steps, and one of the highlights was meeting Chuck Chamberlain. And so I have a lot of warm feelings for the Los Angeles, Laguna Beach Alcoholics Anonymous. And I actually got to go to his house and sit in his chair and listen to him. And I was about 12 or 13 years sober, and I just sat there. My jaw was like this, and he goes on, you know how he talks and talks. And I knew it was wonderful. I could just tell from looking at his face, but I didn't have any idea what he was saying. And now I know what he was saying, because I can see the same things he was seeing. And what a view. And that's the point of seeking, of continuing this search, is to improve your view of yourself, God, and the world around you. And so I was thinking of something to talk about tonight, and I picked on the topic of humility. And the reason I chose that is that humility gets misunderstood. It gets the short shrift sometimes. We make childlike statements like, if you think you have humility, you don't. You follow what I'm saying? And if you say you're humble, then that's a clear indication that you're not. And so it gets to be where you can hardly mention it for fear that someone will know that you're not humble, because if you were humble, you wouldn't even be talking about humility. And so it doesn't get mentioned, so I decided that I'm going to use the Julius Caesar line, that I'm here tonight to praise humility, not to bury it. I don't think I understood what a precious part of me humility is. It is our passport out of the lonely prison of self-centeredness into God's kingdom. The problem is, we already live in a kingdom that's ruled by pride, and it doesn't want to hear anything about another kingdom. And it rules this kingdom with an iron fist. And so it's very difficult for humility to get an audience. And we kind of hide it. And the reason we're so lucky is that as alcoholics, we get driven down to a point where, with respect to this tiny portion of our lives, the alcoholism, we have to surrender. We have to allow a rescue mission into the Iron Kingdom to pull us out of this one near fatal condition. And even the ego and the pride allow that, because if they don't, they could die too. And so we're allowed to be humble enough to say help with respect to alcohol. And in that surrender, we get a very dim vision of what spiritual help is available. Bill calls it a glimpse of God's kingdom. And the best way I could describe that glimpse is that God is standing there with his arms out like this, and he's saying, "Give me all of your burdens and your suffering. I will carry all your burdens, and I will do your suffering for you. Just hand them over." But the doorway, the humility opened, starts shutting, because we're not dying anymore. We're almost dying, but we're not dying. And so we have to learn the hard way about reopening that door. And the door is very simple. It's asking for help. It's saying the words, "I need help. Can you help me with this?" And in the asking of the help, our vision of the world is changed. I would say that's what allows us to work the program, is humility. It's the one penetrating area into pride and running our own lives. And so, as Bill writes in the 12 and 12 in step 7, we generally get the door reopened in our sobriety through humiliation. We finally just get crashed And then we go, okay, I can use some help. And then we get all happy. Yes, this is wonderful. I ought to stay in a constant state of receiving help. And as we receive it, we get a sense of well-being instead of gratitude. And the well-being creates the illusion that the need for help is diminishing. And we start closing the things off and begin a return to self-sufficiency. And then, of course, it leads to another disaster. Not drinking, but some sort of I'm thinking of suicide. Would you like me to come over? No, I'm going to handle it alone. I just wanted you to know that I'm thinking of suicide. And once again, reluctantly, screaming and kicking, we go, yeah, okay, I could use some help. And we get some more. And we get some more. And Bill writes in, I think it's page 75, a great turning point came into our lives when we recognized humility as something that we wanted instead of something that we had to have. And we recognized that we're not supposed to be able to make it on our own.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think.
That we're not supposed to be able to see the world through our own ego eyes. And that it's fun to need help. And so I would describe spirituality as arriving here desperately needing help and trying to increase the amount of help we're receiving year after year, handing over more of the kingdom to our higher power, ceding off acres that we used to call our own, with the hope that someday we could give it all up and just live guided as Chuck was. When he said that he spent the last 22 years just being guided by God, it brought tears to my eyes. And it's what a simple plan. Wow. And the question is then, why don't you do it? Well, I think I would like to do something like that someday. It sounds pretty appealing. But I'm running a business right now. And it's pretty essential that I focus all my energy on. I see, so we're not going to do it yet, right? And so we stand there with God's hand about an inch away from ours, almost taking it, almost touching it, almost stepping into heaven. That's a strange place to stay, isn't it? And there's only one way to move in that direction, and that's through humility, which is an acknowledgement that God is everything. He is everything, which makes my pride nothing. There'll be nothing for my pride to do. And I came up with an example. And we'll pick an imaginary person. He's been sober about 15 years, and it's April 7th, about 8 days away from income tax day. And he's laid out the forms again and steeled himself for the task of looking at those forms and reading it and going nuts. And he starts in on it, and they've made more changes, and it says they add up lines 67 and 68. And if the total of those two lines is greater than line 14, then subtract half of line 28 and add it to line 14 and take the sum of this. And he's just screaming out. It's just killing him. And in his misery, God taps him on the shoulder and said, "Would you like some help? Would you like some help working on that?" And he said, "Oh, come on, God, you can't. You mean you fill out the income tax for me? Yeah. Would you like some help? Would you like this done for you?" And even then, he has to struggle to say yes. There's part of him that, well, no, actually, I'll probably get it eventually. And he finally says, "Okay." And God says, "Well, you remember last week when you were at the club and your friend Larry, you were talking about this to him?" And he said, "Well, Sandy, I'm a tax guy. I do this. I can do it in my sleep. I could come over there and do that in 15 minutes. I'll be glad to do it." You remember that? Yeah. Well, call him. Here's his number. Here's the phone. Call him. Oh, he's probably busy. He's probably busy. Call him. So he calls, and Larry answers the phone. "Larry, it's Sandy." "Yeah. Well, you remember last week you were saying that you could come over and do this?" Yeah. Do you want me to come over?" "God, I'd be glad to get it done in 15 minutes. "Sure, be glad to." "Do you want me to come over?" "Hello? Do you want me to come over?" And God goes, "Tell him yes." "Yeah, Larry, I'd love it." Good. I'll be right over. By the way, is it cold out?" I said, "I don't know. I haven't been outside." "Why do you ask?" He said, "Well, now that we're getting real close to each other, I'm going to level with you. Last week, when I offered to do your taxes, and you said, 'Yeah, if I need you, I'll call you,' and then you walked away, I said to myself, hell will freeze over before Sandy Beach calls me to help him. So I'm just wondering how cold it is outside. And I wonder if there's any of you here tonight where somebody's saying, hell will freeze over before Loretta asks me to help with the party. Hell will freeze over before Carl asks me to help him with anything. You think anybody's saying that about us? Hell will freeze over before we would ever ask for somebody in our lives? And so pride comes in and tries to muscle humility right out of the picture. And we hear these wonderful sayings that I do the legwork and God does the impossible. Did you ever ask God if he does legwork? He'll be glad to help with legwork. He'll be glad to do the possible and the impossible. We make a list of all the things that we have to do by ourselves, which is nothing more than a list of where we're going to leave God out. You follow what I'm saying? Here's the areas where I leave God out under the idea that he would never help in that area. That's the power of pride. And pride has access to all the other character defects. So it's a David and Goliath thing with our humility trying to protect us against pride, who can call in greed anytime he wants. And the battlefield, and there's little David out there. Our humility saying, I'm going to take you on and bring you down. And pride stands up there and goes, oh yeah? Well, I'm going to bring lust in. That's a weak area. You remember that? I'm going to bring in greed. I'm going to bring in procrastination. I'm going to bring in gossip. I'm going to bring in gluttony. You haven't got a chance. You have not got a chance. And humility said, I'm actually going to take you with one hand. And pride looks down and says, you're going to take me with one hand? You're going to fight me with one hand tied behind your back? No, I've got God's hand. Hey, I forgot, the wife wants me to pick up a bunch of stuff. I got to go. But I'll be back. And I'm going to catch you someday when your hand isn't in God's. I'm going to get you then. We have no defense against the first drink. We have a daily reprieve contingent on our humility, giving us a lifeline. So humility is one of the greatest gifts that God ever gave us. If there's anything that'll save us, that's it. So here's to humility. Thank you all, and we'll... and we'll take some questions. Yes, sir. Okay, the question is, how do you get humble? I think at the top of the list would be to seek God. And we use that word a lot. It's almost like you don't even attempt to directly do it, to experience a sense of humility. And seeking is everywhere. At the ABCs, 3 pertinent ideas, and it ends up with the word sought. God could and would if he were sought. And then, of course, in the 11 steps, sought through prayer and meditation. So I think becoming a seeker, in order to become a seeker, we have to take time away from whatever else we're doing to do some seeking, whether it be simply in having thoughts about God. As I try to have thoughts about God. Well, here I am going to Brentwood, God. Well, here we are at Brentwood, God. And I remember Chuck talking about that. It's just like Jimmy Stewart in the Harvey. You remember the rabbit was over his shoulder? Well, Harvey, we're in a, and the reason that was so powerful for him, he was never alone. He was never alone. And so this understanding of trying to never be alone is, to me, one of the wonderful ways to keep the humility channel opened. It isn't that you suddenly decide to be humble. You already have humility. It's a question of keeping the channel open so that is plugged in. It's like a lifeline. And so seeking would be my simple answer to that. I hope it's helpful. Yes?
Could you be specific in your personal daily rituals, like the day in the life of Sandy Beach, from when you wake up in the morning? Do you have a certain amount of time for your meditation? Like, what are your daily practices of spirituality that you do?
The question was, what are my daily practices of spirituality? And I alluded to it earlier, that I try to have it be all day long. In other words, I just find that it's so much fun to think about God. And in other words, if you're going to a business presentation tomorrow, you might ask yourself, well, if God was going to this presentation, how do you think he would handle it? You follow what I'm saying? So now you have a different perspective to think about the business meeting. Well, he would handle it with above board morality. There'd be no shortcuts. Ooh, I better not get him involved in this meeting. That could be... that could be a serious problem. And yet, I guarantee you it will bring better results. And Chuck's whole thing in New Pair of Glasses about how he did business that way. And so you imagine He's just said that. You just start right now with the assumption that God will help you no matter where you're going. And so it's like you pretend. And then it becomes real. And also I found that when I try to sit for 30 minutes, I have a very hard time. I'm like that. And I do lots of reading, and I seek, and I listen to other people and spiritual teachers, etc. And there's a whole school of thought that is built on the idea that anyone can take 4 breaths without their mind interrupting them. For some unknown reason, the ego gives us a free pass because it doesn't know what's going on. And these 4 breaths, hundreds of times during the day, create a space in the middle of whatever you're doing that makes it seem not so pressing and not so closing in on us. And 100 little 4 breaths at the end of the day adds up to 30 minutes. And so it's of equal value. And so it's just a different way. And the reason I like that is it spreads it out so that spirituality is going on all day instead of on this one set aside period. That's just me. There's many people who would find that didn't work, but that's mine. Okay. Yes, sir.
What is your opinion between the difference between humility and humiliation?
Humility that we're talking about would be done voluntarily. And humiliation would be, you'd end up with the results of humility, which is you had to ask for help as the cops arrived and took you away from your destructive whatever. And so I think the big difference is, in other words, humiliation, it was humiliating to be an alcoholic and be sent away to treatment. But the results we got were the same as if we had gone there voluntarily, through humility. So you get the same results, it's just much more painful to get started. And that's why he said a great turning point came when we sought humility for something we wanted, rather than, in other words, we find, well, yeah, you got to get bailed out once in a while. See, that would be humiliation. What about, wouldn't it be fun to be bailed out all the time? Just in a constant state of, I'm being helped 100%. And I'm walking along with hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. Can you imagine pride's reaction to the king walking along hand in hand? You see, pride offers us our own kingdom, and humility takes us to God's kingdom. And pride can do a real sales job by saying, what do you want to be in his kingdom? How about your own? What do you want to be in somebody else's kingdom for? You can have your own kingdom. You're it. You're it. You're the guy. You go over there, he makes you a slave. And we go, no, you're a servant. Same thing. Same thing. Well, a slave and a servant do the same work, only the servant wants to do it. That's the only difference. The servant wants to do it. I love making coffee. I just love it. You follow what I'm saying? So it's the voluntary nature of going against our own self-centeredness. Yes, sir.
Did it take you a long time to know the difference between self-will and God's will?
Yes. The reason is, I think I always knew the difference, but my ego and my rationalization made up absurd stories of why this was God's will. In other words, I could take a selfish thing, and I'm so good at explaining it that by the time I got through explaining it to me, I said, that is quite spiritual. And I'll put the money back later. when we go against God's will, we're uncomfortable. We can't hide from it. We're disturbed, as the 10th step says. And so then we go, and what do you do when you're disturbed? You go ask somebody else to help you figure out why you're disturbed. Because if you ask yourself, you're going to get the biggest line. And then they go, well, the reason is you owe an amend. I don't see it that way. I know. So you run over, you make the amend, you follow the help that your humility was willing to ask for. And then the disturbance goes away, and you know you're back in God's will. I would say disturbance is it. I used to talk to Jim about flying the beam way back when they had the radio ranges. And you listened was the only way you knew if you were on the beam or off. You had no needles, you had nothing like that. You just could hear a signal. And if you drifted off, you got a Morse code for A or you got a Morse code for N on the other side. Dit, dot, dot, dit. And so the way you knew you were on the beam was by going off and back on, because the wind would move you. Nobody could just stay there. You knew that then the radio was broken. And so I think spirituality is very similar. We go along, I'm getting disturbed. So it would be like, and it's time to...
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom?
And the more spiritual you get, the quicker you correct. And we put being undisturbed as the top priority of our day, which the 10th step suggests. And when we do that, we burn up less energy every day, and we're more efficient, as Bill says, throughout the whole day, and so we make better decisions because we're much closer to our intuitive level of guidance. So I would say disturbance is the key. Are you at peace with yourself with the decision of what the will is? Yes, sir, in the back. You.
How often, or with all the time we have, do you still do a 4th step or only do like a 10th step?
10th. Yeah, I'm a there's two schools of thought in AA, so I'm not going to say which one is right, but I did the 4th step, and then I do 10th step. I try to do something similar to that on a daily basis. As soon as I feel I may have done something wrong or I'm disturbed, I have people I call. And I call now. Do you follow what I'm saying? And we have code words. And the code word is, because I'm calling him at his office. And I was at my office. Now I'm retired, but I would call his office and I go, Joe, can I run something by you? That was a signal for maximum of 45 seconds. That was our signal. And he said, shoot. Okay, this guy came in, and then I was that, and I thought I was right, and I still feel like anger, and I still, you follow what I'm saying? And then he said, okay, it's 100% the other guy's fault. That was outrageous. It's absolutely off the wall. Forgive him. Click. Forgive him? Yeah. Click. Okay. There's a 10th step. You see what I'm saying? So I don't let it build up to where I have 50 things, 50 items. I try to just go, disturb, hello, hello, hello. Oh, I owe an amend. And then run over. Okay, right here.
Do you ever have somebody in your life that you've seen killing themselves, and you've watched them for a long time killing themselves, and you feel powerless over the whole situation? How does humility correspond with that? How do you stay humble in that situation? Will that happen in your life? Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I understand that. The question is, if there's somebody in my life, either in the program or a family member or whatever it is, that is killing themselves, I assume you mean from drinking.
Using, whatever. Yeah.
Or using or whatever it is. And, how do you handle it? How do you use humility? The first thing that I was taught is, and it may have been Chuck, that God has no grandchildren. And what that means is that if it's my daughter, I have 2 daughters that are now in AA, but one of them was out in the street, and I mean, so I know what you're talking about. And what the point of that was, God's help to them doesn't come through me. It goes direct. It goes direct. And her experience may be necessary to bring the humility and her own, to bring the humiliation, so her own humility allows her to ask for help. And I may, in a gesture of great kindness, interfere in the process so that the suffering has to be done again to get down to the level. You know what I mean? And so I do everything. I pray for what I should do. I do it, whether it's just to write a letter or a phone call or whatever, and then I go to the movies. In other words, I have to show my trust in God, and I go there. Because if I spend all this time anguishing over it, my treatment of the people I run into is less than cordial. And I have no right to treat people that way just because somebody is suffering over here. And so it sounds like I'm letting go too much, but I don't think you can ever let go too much. I ask people, what could you have done to get to AA 2 years sooner? It's a trick question. And if you really think, the answer is nothing. Do you remember that? Nothing. Well, couldn't have somebody come sooner to the rescue? And then you look. No, I wouldn't have listened. I had to go to the nut ward. Now, my parents are watching it, and I'm sure they were asking themselves the same question. And I'm sure their priest told them, pray for him. He's on his own journey. Okay, another one in the back.
Yes, how did, in your early years of driving, how did you feel when it seemed that people were putting personalities before principles?
When we're new, how do we avoid putting personalities ahead of principles?
Someone is used as an example that you're supposed to look forward to, but they seem to, maybe it's their ego, seems to be not so much to help you, but when we're down, it's like it seems like they just want to look good.
Well, in the beginning, we keep track of everything. No, we do. And we find troubles everywhere. And we do that by thinking about it and going, and so that's what happens in the beginning. You're absolutely right. Look at that guy. He's making fun of me and make himself look better. And look at this guy. And his real motive is this and that. And that is pride and our defects, making sure that their kingdom stays stocked. Because the kingdom is held together with problems. Problems are the bricks of the kingdom. And to keep problems going, you got to think about them. They're pumped up with thought. Bum, 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 bum. And if you don't think about something for 10 years or so, it could go away. It could actually, it could just go, whew, and you can't even find it anymore. And some of those things you promised to never forgive for life. Do you remember that? And you have to go back on your word. And so there's a great difference between when we're new. You just can't possibly juggle this stuff. So you got to rely on your sponsor to try and keep us on the planet until we settle down. Okay? Right in the back.
Heard you recently talk about the path of spirituality being one of removing.
Yeah.
Can you share with us a bit about that?
Yes. The question is that the path to spirituality consists of removing things. And this applies all throughout spirituality. And it's very counterintuitive, but of course all of spirituality doesn't make intellectual sense, it just works. So whenever you're studying spirituality, you want to start studying the results first. And that's what we do in AA. It's a program of attraction. Not intellectually attracted, but how do you get so happy? And it began when Bill was looking at Ebby sitting across the kitchen table. When you read his story, right before he looks at Ebby, he describes his hostility to religion and his distrust of God. And now he was never going to participate in any of that stuff. He just came back from World War I, and there was religious groups, and they're killing everybody. And so I'm not going to get interested in God. And then he looked at Ebby and he said, how did Ebby get like that? He saw a miracle in front of him. He saw a transformation. No information was exchanged. Nothing. And he said, how'd you do that, Ebby? He said, God. He did that. And it forced him to get rid of all his arguments against God. And so he got spiritual by getting rid of all of his old ideas about God. Well, why would you get rid of all your old ideas? Did somebody convince you there was a God? No. There was something in his eyes that made me get rid of my old ideas. And as we work the program, what is all this about? Character defects, old ideas, get rid of, get rid of, get rid of, get rid of. It's like wiping the fog off a mirror. Those are our defects. And as we get them away, we see God, and we see the truth, and we see everything that was there all along before we clouded his kingdom to create our own. And our own became our prison because we didn't know how to get out of there. And we were in there so long, we thought it was real. We really believed that we were alone in this world. And last time I talked to Jim, and he said, no, that's wrong. That prison that's wrong. This is what really happened in that plane. And so I had to wipe off some more off the mirror. And I gave a talk. I've been wanting to tackle this topic for a long time, the present moment. And I ended up using the same approach, that if you want to be in the now, you have to eliminate everything that isn't the now, like plans, goals, causes, judgments. You follow what I'm saying? Anything that isn't happening right now, I let go of. Well, that's everything. That's right. And as you eliminate everything that isn't the present moment, guess what's left? You see, you can't just directly do it. And it ended up being a spectacular journey to really look at that. And I ended up, and let me see what time I got. Okay, I got a couple more minutes, so I want to expand on this just to show you where it went. And it led to the fact that time was an artificial thing. It was just so that we could meet for lunch. But that we've made it into something like it's real. And it became apparent that there's a new way of looking at everything. And I said, you know something? The Big Bang is still happening. Now that's another way of looking at it. It wasn't 15 billion years ago. It's still happening. It went, The creation just went, So I made up a story, as an example, of the Big Bang of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said, for my purposes of storytelling, the Big Bang occurred in Towns Hospital in 1934, when in a split second, we had a singularity. And in that moment, alcoholics all over the world had hope. In that moment. There was no hope for alcoholics until that moment happened. And in that moment, a man was given a spiritual release from alcoholism together with a vision of one alcoholic helping another all around the world. So I would submit to you that that moment is still going on. And we're part of that moment. Isn't that fun? Isn't that nice? We're part of that moment. And since that moment, alcoholics have had hope everywhere. And it's all being done, one drunk talking to another, and the drunk listens to him or her because of how they look. Not what they say, not their knowledge, nothing. They just look and go, how did you get happy? I want what you have. Well, what is it you want? I don't know what it is, but I want what you have. So I find it exciting to see the world that way, and I hope you do too. Have we, one more. It's up. Okay, that's it. Thank you all.
He is probably the smartest man in AA. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. what that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.